Hi, this is Jonathan. In today's video, I want to discuss a little bit about what I do when I do recordings at home in my small little studio, and I thought it might interest some of you how I record my guitars and which interface do I use. So stick around. Some of us are using interfaces at home, which are affordable, and some of you who can afford it will probably go for something more expensive, more professional. And in either case, it works. Whatever works for you, whatever gets you to record a decent sound on tape, or in this case on hard disk, it will suffice. So through the years, especially in recording in the studios, I had the luxury or the privilege to record in those golden era where we were actually using tape machines like the Studios 824s and the 2-inch tape, and we experienced the sonic delicacy of that time period, and then it kind of changed. It kind of evolved through the years, with digital tape, and later on with the ADATs, and then with hard disk recording, and until what we have today, which is basically just hard disk recording on the Pro Tools or whatever DAW that you see fit to use. So we have seen the evolution of recording through the ages. I used to have a 4-track recorder back then, and I used to have a Tascam. And I'm mistaken, that was my early days, and I would do recordings with it, and lay down a basic guitar track, and I'll lay down another guitar track, bounce them all together, and then I'll do a solo on top of it. And if I'm writing a song, I would sing my vocals, and I'll bounce. I even had space for backup vocals, and sometimes even a drum machine or two. So those were the good old days. In today's studio, we are given the luxury of not buying too much gears, because if you own a Macintosh or a PC for that matter, you have plugins available to you as long as you have the capability or the ability to pay for them, or So in today's video, I just want to talk about share about what interfaces I use at home. For the longest time, just in case for some of you who do not know what's an interface, this is your basic interface. It's how it looks like. All right. Now this is the Komplete Audio 6, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I held it up to you the wrong side. Right. This is the Audio 6. You see that? Right. So this comes relatively cheap. I guess it's about in the region of about what, $200 US, something like that. And it's basically a very basic interface. You have your quarter inch or XLR, which is the multi-input, and then you have the gain, and then you have the monitor levels of how loud you want your speakers to be, and in the back you have like 2 sets of in, or rather 4 sets of 4 individual ins, and 2 sets of out. You have a left, right, out, and then there's an RCA for the speakers directly, if you happen to own a powered speaker. Or this is a no-frill interface, because in the days of old, when we record an instrument, we will more or less make sure that whatever gets on tape is stable enough to work on. You don't want to get a signal that's too loud or too soft, because then you don't have room to play with it. You would like to get a balanced signal, And what we used to do is to put our instruments or our vocals through compressors. In case you guys do not know what's a compressor, then it's time to Google it and find out what a compressor does, how does it enhance your sound. So in a nutshell, a compressor would bring out will more or less compress the vocal signal, or rather whatever signal is coming into a manageable chunk of information on tape, so that it doesn't get too loud, overly loud, or it gets too soft. So when signals are too soft, you'll kind of boost it up a little bit because it's compressing it, so it doesn't dip. If it's too loud, then the compressor will just kind of like compress it down so it doesn't get overly loud. Now the trick to using compressor when you're recording is not to use it too much, or rather not to compress too much. You can compress the heck out of it during the mix down, but in the initial stage of recording, you just want to get a healthy signal for you to work on. So there are many times when an engineer or some of you might just want to record it with really hard compression. That's all right if that's your cup of tea, then go for it. But for most of us, or for me, I would get a workable signal to work on, whether it's a vocal or instruments. Now, when I record vocals, most of the time I would like to use a compressor so that I can manage my levels, and I try not to EQ too much when recording. So in this case, I'm using good mics. And nowadays the mics are relatively cheap. I just got me a pair of tube mics from Thomann, which is like ridiculously cheap, but which works. Which really works. So that's for the vocal side. Maybe one day, and I'll do a video about this. So if you really want me to do a video about this, just put in a comment about vocal recordings, of how do I approach vocal recordings in my studio. But basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that when I record something, I would like to get it managed in a way, And interfaces like this, they don't give you the ability or the capability to do that, because it's just a stripped down interface. Signal goes in, goes out to your hard disk, and that's it, or to your door, Or if you need to compress your signal, your vocals or whatever, then you might have to buy an outboard unit, compressor unit, which will set you back. and given the space, the inadequate spaces in my studio, I rather opt for a plugin in this case. So I would like to go for an interface that I can work on, that afford me the ability to compress or to tweak my signal before it goes onto tape. In this case, a hard disk before it goes onto tape. Okay, so I've been using the Line 6 UX2 for the longest time, as I said in my previous video, and that gave me it's USB driven, and it gave me the ability to more or less tweak my sound before I had it committed onto tape. And it was really useful for many years. And it was so cheap, it was really affordable. So I've been using that for the longest time. And recently I just procured a UAD, a Universal Audio Apollo Twin MK2, and that opened up a different world for me, because that gave me the ability to use some of the stuff that I've used before in the studio in the days of old, the old compressors, the old the tube tech stuff, some of the LA2As, stuff that underneath, those bring back memories, and that opened up a new world for me, where I can actually do what I used to do when I was an engineer and really tweak the sound to my heart's content. But again, as I'm recording it and I'm not mixing it, I would just go for the basic stuff. So the major difference between the various interfaces are basically the quality of the ADDAs, the analog to digital and audio to digital converters. And obviously the higher the price range, the better converters you get. I've been using the UX2 for the longest time, and these are really run-of-the-mill converters. They're not really bad, as per se, but if you compare them to, say, a real expensive interface like the Apple G, you can actually tell the difference. The high fidelity of the sound, the high fidelity sound that you can produce from these expensive units as compared to the not so expensive units. Let me just give you an example of how, what an interface is more or less like. When you have a good interface to record with, you're actually using like a DSLR for a shot that you're taking, as opposed to using a normal handphone or mobile phone. And the mobile phone has only that much capability to record the lights, the details, even with HDRM enabled, you cannot compare the pictures taken from a handphone to a picture taken from a DSLR, because of the $1,000 lens and the happen sensor that they have. In Fujifilm or in Nikon, they have really good sensors, and you just can't compare, because you capture more detail. There's more light coming in. There's more detail that's been captured by the DSLR. Likewise, a good interface with this right converters, and you can capture a whole lot of nuances from your voice, from instruments. The recording of sound is such an interesting concept, because imagine a cello, for example. Given the fact that people would pay that tens of thousands of dollars, for a good cello, is because of the quality of the sound that's coming up from them, the age of the wood, the strings, and everything. And you need to know how to mic it up the right way. Same with the acoustic guitar, same with our human voice. A good example is Rod Stewart. He's got a great raspy voice, and he's such an emotional singer. He sings great. He's a great singer. And if you're going to record him with a cheap mic and a cheap interface, there's only so much you can cover. He'll probably do a good performance out of any mic or any interface, but there's only so much you can capture. But given a good mic and a good interface, you can actually capture a whole lot of characteristic of his voice. And that's the point I'm trying to get at. So I hope it will just kind of help you understand what's the differences between all these price ranges of audio interfaces that we have in the market. So an interface is something that is quite important to a home studio. So if you plan on getting one, here are a couple of tips. You have to know what's your budget like. One, you have to know what your budget like. Number two is what are you using it for predominantly. If you're just going to do like a hobby, like at home, and you just want to record some guitar stuff, and then you don't have to get a real full-fledged or a full-blown one. Or are you recording vocals? Are you a songwriter? Do you want to record guitar with vocals and then maybe do overdubs on it, stuff like that? If that's the case, then the UX2 will come in handy. And also, UAD came out with this new one called what do you call it? Arrow. That's it. Arrow Uno. So it just has a single DSP in it. So it's really stripped down. You can still use all the compressors and whatnots that I've spoken before, and it's just a bare basic thing. You just have to record the signal into type and then to your DAW, and then later on you can do your mix down in the studio or whatever in your home studio. So that's basically for musicians on the move, for bands on the move. If you want to do simple songwriting stuff and then you just want to write some songs and demos and stuff like that. So if that's what you want, then get either the UX2 or the UAD Arrow. I'm sure there are other brands out there. There are other models of Komplete, but interfaces are really important to a home studio. So I hope you enjoy some of these little trinklets of information. And if you have any question, just post it down below. And if you want me to do a further in-depth video of how I do my vocal stuff, then let me know down, and I'll see if I have the time for it, and I'll just do one for you guys. So in the meantime, I hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and ring that bell, and you'll be notified of every new video that I come up with. Alright, so till later, ciao.